An Ohio school is now allowing a teacher to keep a gun in school. Why they are allowing that armed protection. Ohio's Attorney General Mike DeWine is reminding judges around the state to report cases where people are determined to have mental illnesses. Judges are required to ensure the Bureau of Criminal Investigation knows about these cases. Someone who is determined to have a mental illness would not be eligible to buy a firearm.
An Ohio school district has one teacher who's allowed to carry his gun to school. Oroville City Schools in Oroville approved letting a science teacher keep a gun in the classroom. The reason? Bill Yerman is also a police officer when he's not teaching kids. The district approved that move last week to try to enhance security.
Every elected official, every important person has armed people, so why wouldn't we arm, somebody to protect our children? The hard part is we've got to make this decision. It's sickening that we have to come to this.
The move helps provide increased security and saves the school from having to hire
people took part in the first ever statewide school shooter training today. 10 TV's Tanisha Millette watched it, and she has information we can all take away from this.
They've been described as the first responders in terms of student safety. This morning, more than 100 teachers came to Columbus to learn more about that role.
I've been in the classroom for 28 years, and school safety is certainly one of the things that's changed the most over my teaching career.
But Training Officer James Burke says teachers are in a unique position to identify students with risk factors who could become active shooters.
They're the ones who know the normal mode of operation of these kids. They can tell just when they walk in the door if something's off.
Burke says he took the final reports from several school shootings to show there were red flags, but no one connected the dots. For instance, he shared with educators a doodle that was written on the top of a Spanish worksheet, a sad face with the words, "You must die," and an essay on love at first sight, where the student author wrote, "Love is evil, and I hate each and every one of you." Burke says the student was reprimanded for not following the assignment, but that was all. Both, he says, were written by Kip Kinkle, who killed his parents, then went to school and murdered 2 students and hurt 25 others. Burke says teachers need to speak up when they see something.
You go to the counselor, you go to the coach, you go to the parents, and you bring that name up. I guarantee you, if they spend any amount of time with that kid, they're going to look at you and go, you know what? He did this the other day around me, and I thought it was a little off.
Information, teachers say, has changed their perspective.
We have to reconsider some of the things that we already have in place. That's definite. And I'm finding the characteristics of some of these active shooters interesting as well.
After being in the classroom for 28 years, it is interesting when you think about all the different things you've seen and you're like, wow, I never really thought about that. It kind of gives you a different perspective.
And they say, never thought it could potentially save a life. Tanisha Millette, 10 TV News.
That trainer says it's important that educators not use the information to profile or label kids, but rather to get the student some help. 106 educators and 26 law enforcement people attended the morning session. There were 6 educators from Upper Arlington schools, 4 from Dublin, and 2 administrators from Hilliard. There are 8 more training sessions scheduled around the state.
The president's gun control plan. Our CBS News poll shows 90% agree on one proposal. Anna Werner on the debate tonight. An overwhelming number of Americans approve of the president's call for universal background checks for gun buyers. The CBS News New York Times poll shows that background checks on all potential gun buyers are favored by 92%. A ban on high-capacity magazines is favored by 63%. A national ban on semi-automatic weapons is favored by a slim majority of 53%. That's interesting because our research department found that 65% of all of the guns sold in America are semi-automatics. We asked also whether the gun laws should be more strict. 54% said yes, 9% said less strict, and 34% think the laws should remain the same. When we asked the public's opinion of the National Rifle Association, the response broke down in nearly thirds. 38% have a favorable opinion. What folks in Colorado are saying about the gun debate, and so we sent Anna Werner to find out.
Jean Assam knows about gun violence.
The whole hallway was filled with this just sense of evil, and it was very intimidating. It would intimidate anybody.
In 2007, Assam, a trained police officer, was volunteering as a security officer inside this Colorado Springs church when a man with a semi-automatic rifle murdered 2 people. Assam stopped the rampage when she shot the attacker with the concealed gun she carried on her hip.
I knew what to do and I had the confidence, I had the training. I was armed and I was present.
Freedom! Like many Coloradans, she's conflicted when it comes to stricter gun laws.
I see very clearly both sides of this debate. I see where they're coming from, and both of their views make sense to me.
This is a state that suffered 2 mass shootings, Columbine and Aurora. But many who live here are hunters, including Governor John Hickenlooper.
We are a fully split state. We're almost exactly 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Republican, 1/3 independent. And there are strong points of resistance to going, if you're going to try and do various bans or really serious restrictions on people's access to firearms. In Colorado, it's the West, and we are a diverse community within the West.
There is no waiting period for purchases in Colorado, and anyone over 21 can apply for a concealed weapons permit. Hickenlooper supports expanding background checks in Colorado to private gun sales, but has doubts about a proposed state ban of high-capacity ammunition magazines.
Of course, the devil's in the details. Is that at 10 rounds or is that at 30 rounds? And that's where the robust discussion is going to come in.
Well, the shooting here in Aurora has prompted the governor, Scott, to propose an overhaul of the state's mental health system, an area he says has been neglected here in Colorado.
Anna, thank you. Yesterday, the president ordered the Centers for Disease Control to begin research on the causes of gun violence. That was something that Congress specifically prevented the CDC from doing. Mark Strassman has more on that.
There is absolutely no question. These are preventable deaths.
Dr. Mark Rosenberg used to oversee research into gun violence and prevention at the Centers for Disease Control. In 1996, the NRA successfully lobbied Congress to put this restriction into the CDC's budget. None of the funds made available may be used to advocate or promote gun control.
These were shots fired across the bow, and they terrorized the people at CDC. They terrorized researchers who said, whoa, this is scary. I don't want my funding jeopardized.
The NRA was infuriated with a 1993 study sponsored by the CDC that concluded having a gun at home offered little protection, but increased almost threefold the risk of one family member shooting another. Funding into gun violence research has plummeted 96% since 1996 to just $100,000 of last year's $5.6 billion CDC budget.
Is gun violence a legitimate public health issue?
Absolutely not.
Bob Barr, a former Georgia congressman, sits on the board of the NRA.
The issue of firearm violence is handled as, and ought to be handled as, a law enforcement matter. We don't need the government involved in this. It is all about the big C, control.
Scott, the next step is up to Congress whether to approve President Obama's request for $10 million to study this issue of gun violence.
Thank you, Mark. Chicago has been plagued by gun violence, and now the mayor there, Rahm Emanuel, is putting financial pressure on gun makers. He talked to Dean Reynolds today.
I've asked all our pensions, city pensions, to review all their investments and make sure we have no investments in any gun manufacturers for assault weapons. And
or sellers?
Yes, but going specifically at the manufacturers, and then divest those funds if they do. I'll be also speaking this weekend to the Conference of Mayors and asking other mayors to step up and do what the city of Chicago is doing as it relates to their pension funds as well. Everybody saw the pictures at Newtown, and I think we're at a point that we're now mobilized as a country to actually not take the status quo anymore.
And just yesterday, a 17-year-old boy was shot to death outside a gym at Chicago State University after a basketball game. That is 22 homicides in Chicago already this month. There were more than 500 all of last year.